In a quiet African village surrounded by rolling farmland, tall iroko trees, and dusty pathways, life moved gently with the rhythm of the sun. Every morning, the sound of roosters echoed through the air as women swept their compounds. Children chased one another barefoot through the red earth, and farmers carried their tools toward the fields. The village market came alive with colorful fabrics, fresh fruits, woven baskets, and the smell of roasted corn drifting through the breeze. From a distance, the village looked peaceful, but beneath the calm beauty, fear lived in the hearts of the people. That fear had a name: Prince Obinna. Prince Obinna was the son of the king and the future ruler of the land. He was tall, handsome, and powerful, dressed in rich royal fabrics embroidered with gold. His voice carried authority, and his presence alone could silence an entire crowd. Whenever Prince Obina entered the village, conversations stopped. Women lowered their eyes, men stepped aside, children ran to hide behind their mothers. He rode through the village on a magnificent horse, surrounded by guards carrying spears and shields. Dust rose beneath the horse's feet as villagers quickly moved away from his path. Obina believed fear was respect. He believed power meant control, and because no one dared challenge him, he thought he was loved. But he was wrong. The villagers obeyed him because they were afraid. They feared his anger. They feared his punishment. They feared speaking honestly. Among all the people in the village, there was only one person who did not fear Prince Obina. Her name was Ngozi. Ngozi was known throughout the village for her kindness and beauty. She had warm brown eyes, a gentle smile, and a quiet strength that made people trust her. She cared for elderly widows, shared food with struggling families, and helped children whenever they were sick or afraid. But despite her soft heart, Ngozi was not weak. She hated arrogance. She believed no person was greater than another simply because of wealth or royal blood. To Ngozi, respect had to be earned. One afternoon, as the hot sun stretched across the village road, Prince Obina rode through the market on horseback. As always, people bowed. Traders stopped speaking. Women lowered their heads. Children stepped aside. But near the village well stood Ngozi. She held a clay water pot against her hip. She did not bow. Prince Obina slowed his horse. The guards noticed immediately. One of them stepped forward angrily. "How dare you remain standing before the prince?" he shouted. The villagers froze. No one moved. Ngozi slowly turned toward the prince. She looked directly into his eyes. She did not tremble. She did not lower her gaze. Instead, she spoke calmly. "I bow to kindness," she said softly, "not fear." The entire market fell silent. Even the wind seemed to stop. No one had ever spoken to Prince Obina that way. The prince stared at her. He expected fear. He expected apology. But Ngozi showed neither. She lifted her water pot and walked away without another word. Prince Obina watched her disappear down the dusty road. For the first time in his life, someone had challenged him, and strangely, he could not stop thinking about her. That night, Obina sat alone in the palace courtyard beneath the moonlight. The palace was grand, filled with stone walls, carved pillars, and flickering lanterns. Yet despite the luxury around him, his mind felt restless. He replayed Ngozi's words again and again. "I bow to kindness, not fear." No one had ever spoken to him honestly. No one had ever dared. The next morning, Prince Obina left the palace quietly. He searched the village for Ngozi. Eventually, he found her near an old mud house. She was helping an elderly woman repair a damaged roof. Without hesitation, Ngozi climbed onto the roof herself, carefully placing pieces of wood into position. Her hands became dusty, her clothes stained with dirt, but she smiled as she worked. Obina watched from a distance. He was confused. Why would someone work so hard for others without expecting payment? When Ngozi climbed down, she noticed him watching. She did not seem surprised. "Why do you work so hard for people?" Obina asked. Ngozi wiped sweat from her forehead. "Because people matter," she answered. "Strength should help others, not frighten them." Obina frowned. Her words unsettled him. Yet he kept returning to see her. Each day he found another reason to watch. He saw Ngozi carrying food to a sick family. He saw her comforting a crying child. He saw her helping farmers gather crops. She never asked for praise. She never expected reward. And slowly, Prince Obinna began noticing something else: the suffering of his people. For the first time in his life, he truly looked around his village. He saw broken huts. He saw empty food baskets. He saw tired farmers working dry land. He saw old women carrying heavy loads alone. He saw children sitting quietly with hunger in their eyes. He realized these struggles had always existed. He had simply never cared enough to see them. One evening, Prince Obinna sat beneath a giant baobab tree outside the village. The sky glowed orange as the sun disappeared behind the hills. For the first time in his life, he questioned himself. Ngozi approached quietly and sat beside him. Neither of them spoke for a moment. The air was calm. The sound of distant birds filled the silence. "You are not evil," Ngozi said softly. Obina looked at her. "Then why do they fear me?" he asked. Ngozi turned toward him. "Because you never gave them a reason not to." Her words struck deeper than any sword. For a long moment, Obina said nothing. He stared across the land, and something inside him began to change. Days later, Prince Obinna made a decision. He would no longer rule through fear. He ordered workers to dig clean water wells so villagers would not walk miles carrying heavy pots. He repaired broken roads. He reduced taxes that burdened poor families. He opened palace food storage to feed hungry villagers during difficult seasons. At first, people did not trust him. They believed the kindness would disappear. They waited for his anger to return. But Obinna remained different. He walked through the village without guards. He listened when people spoke. He helped farmers carry baskets. He worked beside laborers building roads. He visited families who needed help. Slowly, the fear began to fade. Children stopped hiding when he passed. Instead, they smiled. Women greeted him warmly. The market became lively again. For the first time, the people saw Prince Obinna not as a ruler to fear, but as a man learning to care. One day, Prince Obinna gathered the villagers together in the center of the village. The king sat proudly nearby, watching his son. The crowd waited quietly. Obinna stepped forward. He looked at the people. He saw hope instead of fear. "I once believed fear made me strong," he said, "but true strength comes from making people feel safe." The villagers listened carefully. Many smiled. Some wiped tears from their eyes. Then Obinna turned toward Ngozi. She stood among the crowd. He walked slowly toward her. Before everyone, he knelt. Gasps filled the air. The prince lowered his head. "I love you," he said softly. "You changed my heart." Ngozi looked at him. The proud prince who once ruled with fear now stood before her with humility. She smiled gently, and she took his hand. The villagers erupted into cheers. Music filled the air. Drums echoed through the village. Soon, a grand wedding celebration transformed the land. Colorful fabrics hung between trees. Women danced. Men played drums. Children laughed and ran through flower petals scattered across the ground. Ngozi wore beautiful royal attire decorated with beads and gold. Prince Obinna stood proudly beside her. But this time, his pride was no longer built on fear, it was built on love. As the sun set behind the village, Obinna and Ngozi stood together overlooking the peaceful land below. Villagers laughed, farmers worked happily, children played freely. The kingdom had changed. Prince Obinna became known as the ruler who brought peace. Ngozi became known as the woman who changed a kingdom. And from that day forward, the village lived in happiness, safety, and love. The lesson remained forever. True power does not come from fear. It comes from kindness, respect, humility, and love. And she took his hand. The villagers erupted into cheers. Music filled the air. Drums echoed through the village. Soon, a grand wedding celebration transformed the land. Colorful fabrics hung between trees. Women danced. Men played drums. Children laughed and ran through flower petals scattered across the ground. Ngozi wore beautiful royal attire decorated with beads and gold. Prince Obinna stood proudly beside her. But this time, his pride was no longer built on fear, it was built on love. As the sun set behind the village, Obinna and Ngozi stood together overlooking the peaceful land below. Villagers laughed, farmers worked happily, children played freely. The kingdom had changed. Prince Obinna became known as the ruler who brought peace. Ngozi became known as the woman who changed the kingdom. And from that day forward, the village lived in happiness, safety, and love. The lesson remained forever. True power does not come from fear. It comes from kindness, respect, humility, and love. The end.